right, everyone. So welcome. Welcome to the Gephardt Institute for Civic and Community Engagements in the LU session. Today's session is titled In the LU, Supporting Our Unhoused Community. The Gephardt Institute, for those of you who don't know, fosters a culture of civic and community engagement at WashU through educating students, catalyzing partnerships, and infusing civic engagement throughout the university and the WashU experience. We offer events, cohort programs, resources, and opportunities for students, faculty, and staff with community partners to connect with one another and initiatives throughout the St. Louis region. Thank you in advance to our moderator, Sophia Dutton, and our panelists. They will introduce themselves more in depth in just a minute. So just as a note, we will spend about 50 minutes hearing from the panel, and then we'll open for questions for the audience. And you're welcome to put your questions in the chat as we go. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sophia, our moderator. Sophia Dutton is a junior at WashU who is double majoring in neuroscience and Japanese language and culture. She's co-president of Heart for the Unhoused, a student-run nonprofit organization that centers around medical literacy and health resources for unhoused populations in St. Louis. With grant support from the Gephardt Institute, she has most recently focused on connecting unhoused populations with vaccine information and free health screenings. When not in the Midwest, she resides in Kanohe, Hawaii. So I'm going to hand it over to Sophia.
Thank you so much, Colleen. I'm going to take this opportunity now to introduce our panelists. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce yourself with your name, your role in this community, how you've been involved with working with the unhoused community, and what got you involved. So I'm going to start off with Anthony.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony D'Agostino, and I'm at St. Patrick's Center. Really, what got me involved was I've been in nonprofit communities. I was at Springboard to Learning, and I moved over to criminal justice ministry, helping some of our most vulnerable neighbors entering or re-entering society. And the idea of seeing vulnerable populations living right next to you, walking on the street and seeing people like every day when I was downtown, sleeping in corners, hovering around grates to stay warm. We need more and more people just to get engaged, get involved. And I know we're going to talk about that. And just having you on this call, all of you, is a great step. So I'm really excited to continue this conversation.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ramona Curtis from Unhoused STL.
Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Ramona, as Sophia just said, and I'm the founder of Unhoused STL. We are a community organization that cares about providing for the needs of the unhoused. We provide basic necessities. How I started, actually, my background is journalism and marketing. And I started a social media account to tell people to dispel misinformation, to create awareness. I just thought there was a huge need for more information about the homelessness experience. And it just kind of blew up, to be honest. People just were so interested in this information, and they were so responsive, and they were wanting to volunteer and donate, and how can we help? And they kind of activated me to kind of make this a community organization where we could take that passion that people have and help them do something about this. So that's what we're about.
Thanks, Ramona. Next, we have Deborah from Assisi House.
Hi, I'm Deborah Shapiras from Assisi House. And I'm one of the folks who started Assisi House. What we do is establish small homes where our residents live in a supportive community. The residents need to be able to live well in community with each other because they have shared kitchens and shared bathrooms and shared laundry rooms, and they have to pay $260 a month. And it's until a couple of years ago, it was an all volunteer run organization. Right now we have 2.5 staff members and still lots of volunteers to make this work. And how I got involved was really organic, like you'll probably realize the unhoused service community is in St. Louis. I was going to Metropolitan Community Church when our outreach approached us and said, we're going around on really cold nights trying to save people's lives by taking them supplies and bringing them to shelter, but there's no shelter. Could you open an emergency shelter on the really cold nights? So we said yes, and I started helping to manage an emergency shelter, and that was more than a dozen years ago. And after a few years, we said, the whole winter outreach group said, wouldn't it be nice to have a place where the same people would know all winter where they could be. They would have a place to sleep, a warm meal, a bus ticket in the morning, and maybe that would let them get stabilized. So we found a building, we did that. Midway through that winter, we said, this building's too good to get rid of. Let's find a way to keep it. So we converted into permanent supportive housing, figured out if we could get people to pay $260 in rent, that would pay our lease, and then we'd raise money to do the other things. And 6 houses later, here we are. So that's how it happens. And that's what I hope to encourage other people to do, those sorts of things.
Great, thank you, Deborah. And then finally, we've got Delaney from Tent Mission.
Hey y'all, my name is Delaney Munchin and I am from Tent Mission STL. We are an outreach organization mostly taking place in downtown St. Louis and on the south side of St. Louis. I got involved in Tent Mission at the very beginning of the pandemic. My role was just to watch for police interactions outside of some of our encampments downtown. And then Tent Mission kind of started forming into a daily outreach organization. There were 0 resources at the beginning of the pandemic. Even the biggest outreach organizations were shut down due to COVID. So we were out there every day just supplying basic needs. And currently we have 2 different teams, one that does outreach to downtown and one that does outreach to the south side. And we just provide food and basic necessities, and then also try to connect folks to different resources. And then we also we do a lot of political action stuff, trying to move the city in the way that we think is going to be good for our friends who live outside.
Great. Thank you, Delaney, and thanks to all of our panelists. For our audience members, just to reiterate what Colleen said earlier, if you have any questions that come up during the course of this panel, please feel free to chat them. And otherwise, we're going to start with our official panel questions. So the very first one that we'd like to ask you guys is, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see in your work?
I'll speak. For Assisi House, one of the biggest challenges we have is everybody likes to talk about doing something for the unhoused community, but nobody wants us in their neighborhood. And so when we find an appropriate building, we find something that looks perfect for our purposes, sometimes the neighbors bring out the pitchforks and the torches and say, yeah, this is great, go do it somewhere else. So it's really difficult. And you know, one of the things we keep saying, that all the religious organizations in the St. Louis area, there's one on every block, and many of them have an old rectory or an old convent or an old building that's just sitting there. If all of them would just take one family in, we could take care of this problem. But that's probably the biggest challenge we have, is getting community to say, yes, as community, let's solve this, and we're happy to be alongside you.
I think that for doing street outreach, there are a ton of like hard issues to face. But one of the biggest one is working with or just working in the city. There has been a lot of what seems like direct pushback from the city in regards to being able to get resources to the unhoused. We are constantly in a what seems kind of like a fight in regards to how are we going to be able to get life-saving resources right now. So that is currently what we're trying to deal with. Today is going to be, I think the low is 7 degrees. And we've already had one person pass away this year that we know of. And it has just been like a constant battle with the city in order to get people the life-saving resources that they need immediately. And then also volunteers. In a pandemic, I totally understand people are very hesitant about coming out and doing face-to-face work with folks. But our volunteer base all throughout the unhoused community who are working with the unhoused are burnt out beyond belief. And we're really struggling to find folks who have the passion and who have the ability to come and help us, because this is not like an issue that only happens during the summer. It happens all throughout, and it's just living in constant emergency. So finding volunteers that are able to help give breaks or whatever that looks like is also been a huge deal.
I'll piggyback on what Delaney said. I think that the biggest challenge for my organization when we deal with unhoused people is the fact that we know the city has the funding and the capabilities, the expertise to do something about it, and they are not. They're not just pushing back, they're simply not doing anything. They currently have $40 million earmarked for unhoused and housing insecure communities in St. Louis from ARPA money, COVID relief money. They got it in October and they still have it because they're not spending it despite the fact that people need it now. When Delaney talks about the volunteers, they're so stretched, so thin because private, all volunteer citizen groups are being forced to do what our city government will not do. That probably is the biggest challenge and it's the biggest frustration right now. And I'll leave that there because I could go on and on.
I didn't even bother to talk about that because it's been that way forever.
Well, well said by all three of you. This is, it's been a frustrating week with the cold temperatures and trying to figure out ways to bring people in out of the cold and make sure that we don't have another incident like our neighbor last week who died from exposure. So I would say along the lines of what was said by these three, the system is broken. So we need systematic and systemic change to what's going on. Oftentimes you will hear, and I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt, you hear from people at the city that says, we can't do this, we can't do that because of the process or the procedure that's in place or within the system. And that just tells me every time I talk to city, well, if I don't want to blame the individual and give them the benefit of the doubt because they sometimes are in this work and they do want to help, well, then we need to focus on creating a better system to get this money out. Ramona talked about $40 million. I have no doubt that the city would like to get some of that money out. I don't know. I'm not in city politics. We need to get it out there. Like we need to help people, as Delaney said, people are stressed to the max. They're burnt out to the point where we can't find people to fill shifts. 7 degrees tonight. It's a travesty that we're going to have dozens of people potentially on the streets around the downtown St. Louis area. And we have the ability and resources to do it. And we're not, I mean, I hate to make the analogy, but we're not like San Francisco or LA. We're not having 60,000 people on the streets who are unhoused. We have in the hundreds right now on the streets that are going to be cold tonight, dozens or hundreds. Like, this is a solvable problem. And that's, I think, the most frustrating piece that we deal with, that we can solve it. It's just, we need to create a system that actually can solve it.
And can I also speak to Deborah's point of, yeah, it has been that way.
Yeah.
It has been that way for years, but there's been some new things that have happened recently. You know, for years they claimed that they didn't have the money, right? Well, we know they have the money, right? We also had a prior administration that showed they didn't really care about the unhoused population. Well, our new mayor, Tashara Jones, she ran on the premise that she did care about the unhoused population. She also was just appointed to this National Housing Commission that HUD did. She's one of the supposed key players in how we can break this system, how we can change things. And yet here we are doing the same thing while people are not just dying, but suffering, because for every person that dies, there are hundreds that are out there suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's kind of like, what are the problems that cause this? Well, other than systemic racism and generational poverty, we have the realities of everything being fractured in our government, and in the St. Louis area, particularly, with every aldermanic area and the city and county being separate, and everybody has their power and their rules and their regulations, and all they do is crash together and not get things out in the street where it's needed. It's almost February, and the winter relief has not happened from the city yet. And that happens year after year, which is why we have winter outreach shelters, which is why we have people running around as volunteers burned out, because the city can't turn loose the money because they all have to have fights with each other. So we all, for a minute, we're going to have to keep doing it.
I think it's also important to point out that Tent Mission, Winter Outreach, Unhoused STL, many others, St. Patrick's probably, but we are all volunteer. I mean, the people that work with us have 9-to-5s.
Yeah.
They have jobs, they have families. They are just like the people on this call, you know, and then they go and they do this on the side because the city won't. That's why we're so stressed out. This isn't like our main gig.
Yeah. You know, there is, never am I the one to think I should be in defense of the city, but the other thing that I think is really important in this area is the city gets all of the weight for this. It is surrounded by St. Louis County, and any poor unhoused person in St. Louis County moves into the city because at least they have some hope they'll get some shelter or some relief there. So that's also a crazy thing about where we live, is the city itself ends up with an unfair amount of the burden because of the way the structure is built.
It's a good point. About once a month or so, we get an individual dropped off at our front door from a county police officer. And I, once again, as you said, Deborah, in the defense of the other side, I know that the officers oftentimes say, well, this individual asked to come to St. Patrick's Center. But obviously, the city has most of the services for people who are unhoused. And so therefore, counties around this, you know, St. Charles and St. Louis County, all these counties are basically, they send individuals our way.
Yeah.
And, you know, and there's that disconnection. It's, once again, systemic. And I'm also sorry, Sophia, you probably are never going to get to your second question with the four of us on this topic. But I will say, you know, unless we start changing some of those systems, we're not going to get it. For example, NIMBYism, which Deborah brought up at the very top of this hour. We have projects we're trying to get going this month and into next month. And I have aldermen and other people trying to really focus on creating community buy-in. But I'm gonna be honest with you, and I appreciate their situation, but we're never gonna get community buy-in for a lot of the things we're doing. I know other cities, and we take best practices. In my opinion, other cities come in and they take over pieces of land and just create communities that are needed if they are needed, right? And I know we're going to get to this later, but if we're talking about an intentional encampment, you can't name a community you're going to go into and say that, and they're going to say, "Yep, do it here." It's not going to happen. So if we want an intentional encampment, we have to be specific about how we create a system, and other cities have done it. We can use their roadmap to actually, with people knowing, clear. I don't want to do it behind closed doors, but this is what we're doing. Here's why, and we're not always going to ask for permission. We just have to do it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But, if I may, we could even take that a step further. We can say, okay, well, the community's not going to want it, but we have community members right now who are saying that they want to help out. And so if I can speak to, if I may, Anthony, I read in the media that there is a particular alderman in the city of St. Louis who is stopping an important intentional encampment that St. Patrick's is trying to erect. His name is James Page. I'd like to give you guys his email address. I'd like for everybody on this call to email James Page, our alderman, and ask him to stop blocking this tent encampment. Is that okay with you, Anthony, if I do that?
You already did it.
His email address is pagej, P-A-G-E-J, at stlouis-mo.gov. Please email him and many of our other aldermen, including Louis Reed, the president of the Board of Aldermen. We have about, I don't want to get the numbers wrong. I'm working with an organization where we're going to start talking about putting political pressure out there. And I hope I'm not getting out of order, Sophia, with your questions, but we're talking about NIMBYism, right?
Not in my backyard.
Yeah, not in my backyard. We don't have to accept that.
I think you might have froze, Ramona.
Encampment. Unhoused people are there already. Okay, we can try to make them invisible, but they're there, and we need to let our aldermen in the city, and if you're in the county, let your county people know that this is unacceptable. And Louis Reed is the president, and I'm going to be having information on Unhoused STL's website and social media very soon as we get through this cold wave, about Board of Aldermen that are against, I think it's 18 or 13, I don't have my number right, Board of Aldermen who have actually enacted laws where they're saying you can't come in our ward. And some of these wards, they need improvements anyway. An intentional encampment might be actually an improved community in some of these wards, if I may say. And I live in North City, okay? So anyway, I just want to make you guys aware that the Board of Aldermen in the city of St. Louis is actually stopping efforts by St. Patrick's Center and other providers to provide intentional places where we can house, feed, and shelter human beings. They're stopping it.
I do want to just say real quick, and you're right. Thank you, Ramona. I think that the reason, and by the way, I have to plug for, Alderman Page. He's been here since April, and I mean, he is by far better than the previous alderman we had. He engages, he has conversations. I talked to him at length this weekend. He is, in his defense, he is representing what he's hearing in the community. So he's getting a crazy amount of pushback, and he's telling me about it every time he gets these. He sends it to me. I'm getting so much pushback. It's hard for me as an elected official to do that. So elected officials oftentimes will, promote what their constituents are telling them, or the most vocal ones. So I appreciate what Ramona's saying. We need to be more vocal about the positive. potentially creating services in a ward. And so I think, and also to his defense, he hasn't said no to it. He's trying to figure out a way. I think he's trying to figure out a way to get to yes, but he wants to figure out a way that it's not throwing in the face of the people who elected him. But that is the issue that I was talking about earlier. At some point, as a community and as a metropolitan area with systems, we have to have a system in place that doesn't allow some people to make decisions that that are going to hurt our most vulnerable neighbors. And so the aldermanic system, in my opinion, is somewhat broken. When you have a system where one person in a ward who controls that ward, an alderman, can make a decision, and this is not about Alderman Page, this is about any alderman, they can make a decision on a thumbs up or thumbs down for a project. And it just causes this segregation and this silo nature that we've had for, segregation by design here in St. Louis that we've had since 1764. So, I mean, we need to change that, and we need to put out the reasons why this is important. For example, I'll just plug, the encampment is almost $1 million of cash infusion for services, for clinicians, for case managers, for people to go into an area of the community that already has people living in encampments. So it's taking the people who are currently living there and then offering them the services and wraparound that allows them to become self-sufficient or get out of the situation that they currently find themselves in. But to create an encampment, like, for example, I know Missoula and other cities have created outside the city and then said, oh, hey, all you homeless people, why don't you just go outside the city and get services? They don't go. Like,
Right.
if you created some kind of like crappy services, like, crappy town outside the city and asked me to leave my house, I'm not going anywhere. Like, this is where I live. This is my community. There's people I know live here. They want to stay there. So why not create the services around them and then help them get that leg up? But it is tough. It's not in my backyard.
Right. And, one of those systemic changes that Assisi House really tries to fight for, but hasn't figured out how, is if we want to put one of our houses in a community, we have to get the active endorsement of 51% of residents within 500 feet of the building. And some of those are absentee landlords, it's all kinds of, but 51% have to sign and say they want us there, which is a crazy obstacle in the way.
And if I could just speak to, I think that what that really speaks to is the fact that we collectively as a society have decided that unhoused people are bad. They're our enemies. They should be shooed away and invisible. And I think one of the things that's hugely important is for us to stop doing that. We have got to start thinking of homeless or unhoused people as others. They're really us. They're you or me, one or two paychecks away. Seriously, you guys. I really got involved in this because I am a college degree professional who found myself living in my car for 2 weeks. And it changed me personally. I realized, I was so hungry for lunch one day. I was working in my office and I just was tired of asking my coworkers to spot me for lunch. And I was so hungry, and I saw a man standing on the corner with a sign that said could he have some money for lunch? And I actually thought in my mind, I should just go get a sign, and get some lunch this afternoon, because I'd rather do that than go back and ask my coworkers again. And at that moment, I really realized how we are all so incredibly vulnerable, and we could all be in the situation. They're not all substance abuse users and drug addicts, and it's not all these people that are bad. A lot of our unhoused neighbors are people that have jobs. There are people that live in U-Hauls and their cars, U-Haul storage units, their cars. There are people that get up and go to work. And actually, recently at a warming center, one of my colleagues ran into their coworker. Their coworker was at the warming center, at the shelter, and she had no idea that, you know,
Mhm.
once we do that, maybe we'll want to help them. Maybe we'll want to do something. Maybe it'll be okay for them to come into our neighborhoods and be our neighbors.
Yeah,
Because they are anyway, like for real, they're there anyway.
they are anyway. And, you know, it is that other thing. And, you know, generational poverty has a lot to do with it too, because what I realize is if my house burned down today and I didn't have any insurance on it, and I didn't have any savings, I have family and friends who have enough that they would let me live with them. Many of our neighbors who are unhoused, their family and friends already have everybody they can possibly have living with them. And there's just not a place, there's not the extra resources, there's not that can reach back and do it, that those of us who've been privileged to be in middle class just count on. And that's, you know, it's us. And, you know, to quote Mother Teresa, if you can't feed 100 people, feed just one. Just find a way that you can do one piece that helps somebody be warm or have a meal. And if everybody does that and personally does that, we fix it. It's when we want to put it over there that it doesn't happen. Or we want to go and do it at Christmas or Thanksgiving and forget about it the rest of the year, that it doesn't happen. But it's accompanying day to day that'll help make a difference with us and our neighbors.
I also have to say real quick to piggyback on what Deborah said about generational poverty. I have to say it's also institutional and systemic racism. St. Louis City is 50% African-American. However, the unhoused population is hugely, I don't know the numbers, but mostly African-American. Just, you know, and that's because of systemic and institutionalized racism.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The people who come to us, we have currently a 71% African-American population coming through our doors.
Yeah.
I see a question in the chat that I would like to answer. It says, can panelists explain the role of this continuum of care in organizing resources? So actually St. Louis is one of the only cities that in the United States that does not have their continuum of care making holding the money to make the decisions for homeless services. So currently what we are trying to work on is pressuring the city to give the money to the COC so they can make those decisions. The COC is made up of folks from all different sectors of the homeless services, and they have a lot better of an idea on what is actually going on the streets. They have a much closer ear to the ground. And we think that if the COC were to have the money, they would spend it in a lot more equitable and reasonable way. So currently the COC does not have enough role or power in those decision-making processes. And then the other question that this person asked was, can panelists explain the relationship between hospitals and social services and impacting homelessness? That's a massive, massive question. And I think like just systemically, there's a lot to unpack in that question. Immediately, what I can tell you is that even just like in our shelters that literally a 21-year-old is running and who is also a full-time student, who is also stressed out of his mind. The hospitals are releasing folks at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and when there's only one shelter in the city that actually is closing today, is able to take. So there are folks who are getting out of the hospital with all types of crazy wounds who weren't cared for properly in the hospital that are now coming to our shelters where, frankly, children I'm 24, but I'm still a kid, like, are supposed to be taking care of these people. And we don't have the resources, we don't have the know-how, we don't have any of these things to properly care for these folks. There were respite care proposals submitted to the city. We still are waiting to hear back if those are going to be passed or not. But again, it is almost February. And when people are getting released at midnight or 3, it's either like they go back outside to the freezing weather, or there's some shelter that has to scramble to figure out how we're going to take folks in. And a lot of times that is such a triggering and traumatic experience for folks that it's impossible to regulate their emotions and even just like their body functions. So that is not necessarily the full answer to that question, but it is the immediate impact on, and it's not the hospital's fault either.
Nope.
Like, there's just nowhere for folks to go and no resources that are out and publicly able for us to access.
Yeah, that really isn't the hospital's fault, because if somebody's in for a mental health hold, they have to be released. If they don't care to stay, they have to be released after the period of time is up. And if that's 3 a.m, they're out. And the hospital would love to have some place to call that they could have a safe transition. There isn't any place. So they get a bus ticket at best, or a call to one of our volunteers who tries to figure out what to do with them.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you guys for first of all, to our audience members for all the insightful questions, and of course to our panelists for the great discussion. The next thing, kind of building off of everything that we've just talked about, is what, if anything, have you seen modeled in other cities that have worked really well in reducing the number of people that are unhoused?
Even just in Kansas City, I know that, I think it was this past summer or the summer before. COVID time is so like confusing to remember. But they came up with a homeless bill of rights. And I know that that's something that folks are currently working on in this city. But it just gives more voice to the unhoused. There's very few spaces in which the unhoused are asked, like, hey, what do you want to happen to you? Or what services are going to be beneficial for you? Most of the time, it's a bunch of, frankly, white people sitting in a room discussing what should we do for these folks, without really asking, what do you want to be done to you? So I think that is one. I know Anthony mentioned in a couple other cities, the intentional encampments, which I think are, like, when we were running them 2 summers ago, or not running them, but helping folks who were living at the intentional encampments, there was just such a sense of release having folks like all in one space. All of the service providers know where to go. Folks feel so much safer having their friends or people that they trust sleeping around them, as opposed to having to move your stuff every night, as opposed to being on edge all the time, or if the police or someone else is going to harass you or jump you or any of that. So intentional encampments are for sure something that are very, very important.
I think that there's kind of 2 things going on with that question. How can we help people that are experiencing homelessness? And that's what a lot of us here do. But then we can also talk about maybe having people not be homeless. So, you know, our principle is that housing is a human right. And perhaps let's just give people housing. If we were to have, you know, of this $40 million, of all this ARPA funding and these billions of dollars that have come in to help this situation, I've noticed that none of it is really talking about housing. We need housing. That's really, we need affordable housing that the government involves themselves in. Because when we have private market housing, it doesn't help poor people. Poor people can't get in private market housing. That's a lot of reason why we have homelessness. Now we can talk about what we can do in the meantime with the encampments and I want to mention that one of the things, there's a group called Mobile Loaves and Fishes that has this great community down in Texas where they've actually gotten enough money to build different styles of tiny homes for people that have experienced homelessness. There are solutions and people have enacted them. They take money. So we need money and we need houses. Those are the two things we need.
Okay, great. So, based off of those needs, would you guys have any ideas of specific policies or legislation that is particularly needed right now for housing justice?
Well, this will be a good time to share with you guys that my organization has started a petition where we are trying to pressure our city government. When we started this petition on November 1st, and I believe, Sophia, you said you put the link in the chat for me.
Yes,
You know, when this money was distributed in October, we kind of saw this coming. So we asked the city and the Board of Aldermen to do something now on November 1st, and it's January 25th, and now it's been a pretty damn long time because they still haven't done anything. Right now we've got 840 some signatures. We want to work with, Unhoused STL wants to work with Tent Mission and any other organization. We want to put some political pressure out there. So there is currently a, you know, check out your Board of Aldermen, even if you don't live in the city, you know, the Board of Aldermen in the city, they're the ones that are deciding the fate of the unhoused people that are in the city. Check out those meetings on Friday, see what people are saying. There's a bill that's out there right now where they are trying to make it illegal to just sweep tent encampments, where they're trying to protect people's property. You know, Delaney mentioned it briefly, but what we haven't had a chance to talk about is the way that unhoused people have been terrorized and criminalized in this city. As soon as Tent Mission gets a group settled and they know where they can come and get them and take them their medicine and their food, the city comes and sweeps them away. It's brutal. It's just an incredibly dehumanizing, brutal thing. My organization has monthly giveaways, which we have to now make mobile because the police were coming and targeting the community. They were using our giveaway, which Sophia and your Hearts for Unhoused has actually been part of, and thank you. They were using our giveaway, you guys, as a way to find the unhoused people, to target them and criminalize them. So I don't even remember what the question was, but that's ways we can fix this. Get angry. We need a movement. Write your aldermen, write your congressman, write Cori Bush. Talk to your moms and your dads about this, and don't look away. Stop looking away, because unhoused people are here. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm tired, you guys. We've had a cold snap, and I've been running on empty, obviously, so.
Yeah, I would like to echo Ramona. And first of all, thank you, Ramona. You're so awesome, and I look up to you. But I think that we need to really, first of all, look at our internal and implicit biases and really start working through that, so we can not only be like serving people, but also like be walking with folks on this journey. Because when that happens, you see something being done to like your friend or your brother or your sister, and that like makes you move a lot faster and makes you move in a really different way. Also, Tent Mission, along with some other folks, some other organizations, are currently coming up with a plan of action in regards to how we're going to pressure the city. So if y'all will follow Tent Mission on Instagram and Facebook, more information about that will be coming out within the next week. And there will be opportunity for action. It's really sad, but there just has been a lot of less political action this past summer and winter, because the folks who are normally planning these actions are so tired, are so burnt out, and so traumatized. Like, there's just not enough resources for folks who are doing this work. But hopefully we're gathering the right people and the right voices in order to continue putting this political pressure on the city of St. Louis.
The metaphor that many of you have probably heard is that we are all engaged in some way at being downstream, pulling the people out who are drowning and trying to keep them from drowning, because it's got to be done. It's got to be done right now. Here comes another one. And you are also addressing the going upstream and trying to address why are there so many people in the river? And that's when we get back to the fixing systems, providing education for people in all parts of the community, providing resources for people in all parts of the community, and breaking down those kind of barriers. But again, I guess what I encourage you to do is whatever calls to you today, do it. And if that is to join one of these organizations, to join Tent Mission, to join Unhoused St. Louis, to come with Assisi House and accompany residents who are already in supportive housing, but who need that kind of accompaniment to help them reach whatever their next goal is. Find a way that calls to you and just do it, because that's the way we're going to make a difference. And like Ramona said, talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your parents, talk to people who have resources, and say, what if we did this right here, right in our neighborhood, and invited a family to come live here? I can promise you one of these groups will be able to help you find that family. If you'll be willing to make a commitment to accompany them and help them find their balance so that they can break the cycle.
I agree with everything everyone has said. I just wanted to maybe get a little philosophical and talk about policy and legislation on a bigger scale, and kind of where it comes from. We talked about, it was mentioned already, the Unhoused Bill of Rights. And I think we need to start talking about human rights. I think that at one point, several years ago, when we were talking about healthcare and universal healthcare came up, and the ACA and Obamacare, I remember there's a lot of conversation about is healthcare a right or a privilege? And I think on this call, and a lot of people, I think listening, I hope believe that housing, basic housing, is a human right. That when you go up, for example, with healthcare, it is a law and it's illegal for someone who is in an emergency to go to an emergency room, and for that emergency room to turn them away. It's illegal. You can't do it. That is the same type of policy we need when it comes to housing. If someone comes and needs a shelter for the night because it's literally tonight going to be 7 degrees, it should be illegal for them to turn them away and not find a place for them to stay that night so they don't freeze on the streets. That is a human right that everyone in this country, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, you should have. And it's the same thing with healthcare. It's the same thing with housing. I'm not talking about living in a mansion. I'm talking about just not being on the cold street at night. And unfortunately, we have a system in place where we don't have enough beds on a given night, and we don't have the infrastructure system in place to make sure that everyone has that human right tonight. And so upstream and downstream, I mean, Deborah is right on. We're spending so much time pulling people out. We're not thinking about, creating laws that say basic housing is a human right. That would start to stop some of this problem. Like, we'd have to start creating systems. We should have legislation where every single new building that's created, housing unit or apartment building, every single place has to have at least a third of that building affordable housing units. I mean, right now we have 0. Like, we need a law that requires anything that's built to have affordable housing. How do we deal with this 5 or 10 years down the road if we continue to have a completely for-profit system? And I'm not against for-profit systems, but I am against it when we're talking about a basic right. So you know, people are trying to make money on housing. I get that, and they can do that, but we need to have a segment of housing that is not about making money. It's about making sure people are going to live through the night. And we don't have that currently.
And if it was done the way that Anthony proposes, which is that every big housing unit had to have a percentage what was for affordable housing, then truly it becomes an integrated community with people at different incomes all being physical neighbors, and that would change things tremendously.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I guess to sort of finish up then with our questions, the last thing I'd really like to ask you guys is if you have action items that WashU students can do right now, even right after this call, to help take action and support the unhoused community in St. Louis, especially as it's getting so much colder.
I know I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. Just watching out on Unhoused and on Tent Mission for when opportunities for volunteering do become available. Especially right now, we're in the midst of trying to get another safe haven up and running. And for those who don't know, a safe haven is a 24-hour anyone can come shelter. And those are vital in order to keep folks safe. So when opportunities like working in a shelter become available, please, please, please take those opportunities. Even if you don't know what you're doing, as long as you're coming willing and wanting to learn and also unbiased, I think that we can definitely find a role for you. Also, there are just like basic necessities and basic resources that are constantly needed. And again, those I'm sure Ramona keeps up with that, and so does Tent Mission by posting about what those resources are. And then also doing St. Louis winter outreach every night. Deborah, correct me if I'm wrong on these temperatures, but when it's 20
or below without precipitation, 25 or below with precipitation, go to Mokabee's Coffee House at 6:30 and they will send you on the street to help people paired up with some other folks.
Yeah, so tonight my group is leading it. So we'll be there meeting around 6 at Mokabee's in Tower Grove. And I would love to see some of y'all there. I know we have a pretty big group going tonight, so it'll be nice for folks' first times. You'll be partnered with someone if that's what you want, and kind of given like a show of the ropes on like how to do this work and also what other work needs to be done. There are so many layers to the problem of being unhoused, like so many layers, and the more often you can immerse yourself in the experience of going out and being on the streets, the more you'll understand and the more you'll know how to what action needs to be taken in order to address the problem.
And also, excuse me, for immediate volunteer needs, like Delaney said, the Safe Haven, they've actually extended
Yes.
how long they're going to be open and providing 24-hour shelter, and they're relying hugely on volunteers and people to bring meals. There is a sign-up sheet that I'm going to be posting if you want to sign up for either a volunteer shift or to get some meals in there. And you know, even if you're not ready to commit to signing up, sometimes just stopping by. The warming center is at 3050 Olive. It's near downtown. Sometimes just stopping by and bringing a case of water, saying, hey, do you guys need me to run an errand? Do you need socks? I mean, these needs come up, so things are so fluid that, you know, just sometimes just being present and caring is like huge. Also, we are going to be organizing something where we can get some hygiene kits together, and we're accepting blankets. We got a whole lot of stuff going on. So how can you help? Go to Tent Mission STL, Unhoused STL, Winter Outreach, www.winteroutreach.org. Anthony, what is it? www.stpatrick.org. They are always in need of volunteers and warm winter gear. So it's just a constant need, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we have the Lincoln Hotel. We've opened up 20 new beds to get people in off the streets in the last few nights, and we need people to staff them, because this actually, we opened them up on Friday Saturday in response to the Friday need, and as it continues to stay cold, we obviously can't hire people within a couple days. It takes weeks to hire someone and go through the hiring process. So we're in a struggle to get enough people to really staff all those shifts. So I'm putting it in the link now. Obviously, you've already heard about a lot of great opportunities to volunteer, but if you don't want to like actually go there, you don't have the time or the ability right now, just highlighting this, talking about it, like this, right? What we're doing right now is huge. Talking about this issue, bringing it up to other people, voicing the concern, highlighting these issues, because if we don't highlight these issues, then we don't move anything forward. So please talk to everybody you can about this and make sure it's on everyone's minds and on their lips when we're going forward, especially when it's cold outside.
Mm-hmm. And then my final pitch, don't look away when you're at 64 and Grand or whatever intersection. Have some snacks in your car, be willing to give a $5 or $10 bill, a gift card. Just help that human being, help them through that night, please.
Have some hand warmers in your car.
Mm-hmm. Blankets.
Yeah, I see a question in the chat that kind of goes off of that. It's, oh gosh, I lost it, but it was something along the lines of, like if you see someone when you're, what should we do when we are in our car and we see an unhoused person on the street? I think first of all, like recognizing the humanity in the person that you're seeing is extremely important. Looking them in the eye, saying, hello, how are you? And then having all of those resources in your car. Sometimes my friends and I will get together and just make little baskets that we keep in our car that have like essentials that we can just give folks when we pass them on the street. Like some people are uncomfortable for their own reasons with giving money. I personally give money because I know that, money can be used to buy food and buy other resources that are needed. But some folks are uncomfortable with that. So having snacks and having water and having hand warmers right now, or pairs of gloves, a blanket, those are all like can be life-saving things that you're giving folks. And then I see that Jacob put in the chat, if you don't have your own mode of transportation, are there other ways to get rides to Mokabees? Jacob, I'm gonna DM you my phone number and we can chat about that and see if there's a way to get you to Mokabees. So yeah. Oh, and then also from Colleen, what all do you all do when we go on winter outreach? Ideally, what we do is we find folks and we ask if they want to go to shelter and we bring them to shelter. Unfortunately, there is not enough shelter beds. So probably by the time we're leaving Mokabees, there's going to be no more beds to take folks to. The warming bus that meets downtown mostly fills all of those shelter beds by the time it's time for us to go out. So basically we are the last resort to make sure people have the resources in order to make it through the night. And like what we know, certain spots to check, certain alleys where folks hide in between dumpsters, and we just go and make sure that they have enough resources to make it through the night. And if there are shelter beds, it would be an absolute treat, and we would ask them if they wanted a ride to the shelter, put them in our car and take it there, and then make sure that they make it through the intake at that shelter and make sure that they have a bed. So Jacob, I will DM you or whatever, PM you my phone number right now and we can work out some details.
It's also worth noting that if you're not comfortable doing direct outreach like that, winter outreach also needs shelter aides in the morning and in the evenings, and they need people to clean, right, Deborah?
Yeah, yes,
the facility.
as Ramona did at our shelter this morning. So
So everybody's not comfortable going out and doing that kind of outreach. There are other volunteer opportunities if you're not comfortable doing that.
There was also a question directly for Deborah regarding your earlier point about needing 51% of neighbors to sign off for their houses. We have an audience member who's wondering if that's considered to be a law or a deed restriction.
it is a requirement to get an occupancy permit in the city of St. Louis. So it is a law that you have to do that in order to get the kind of occupancy permit we need.
And also there was an earlier question about rent stabilization efforts, which I will resend to everybody. Oh, there, Colleen has beat me to it. So the audience member said, I've heard of rent stabilization efforts in some other cities and was wondering what kind of effect expanding this in St. Louis could have in terms of helping people have affordable housing. Are those things already underway in St. Louis?
I don't think it's underway, and I have no idea what effect it would have.
We need a living wage. I mean, you know, we've got people that are making $10 an hour to fast food jobs. They can't pay $500 and $600 a month. You know, it's way deeper than rent stabilization, but maybe that's a solution. I don't know, but we're not enacting it as a city, I don't think.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ramona. I think that as far as cost of living and cost of rental, et cetera, St. Louis is pretty remarkably reasonable compared to many other parts of the country. But if people don't have income, they can't make, you know, first and last month rent and in order to move in, and they have bad utility bills left over from some other place they lived, so they can't move in because of that. So it's that they don't have money.
I do think.
Go ahead, Delaney.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Anthony. I do think that rent stabilization is definitely one step towards an equitable system. It's really hard to make equitable decisions in a really inequitable system. But rent stabilization is one way. I had a few families this past summer when there was an eviction moratorium, their rent was increased, and when they were unable to afford that rent, they were kicked out of that housing. And a lot of times folks are told, like, hey, at the beginning of the month, like, or not even at the beginning of the month, not even, like, that's if you're lucky, like, your rent is going up, either you're going to pay it or you have to get out. And finding affordable housing right now in the city is nearly impossible, especially if you don't have the know-how and the resources to find that. And then moving alone costs so much money. It leaves people in the situation of being evicted and having nowhere to go. So I think rent stabilization is definitely one way to start that. I definitely do not think it's the end all be all. And from what I know, even if there is rent stabilization going on in the city of St. Louis, which I don't think there is, there are so few like folks who are upholding those laws. Like the eviction moratorium really, from what I saw, it was not very helpful. I had so many families, like families with little kids, getting evicted this past summer. And I mean, throughout the time right now. So laws like that, I would be very interested in how those are actually being implemented, because like slumlords and landlords like that really don't care what the laws are. They're going to do what they want to do. And most of the time, the police will be on their side.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree. Rent stabilization would be one piece to move us in the right direction. But this is like a both and. There's so many things that we have to do, and it's so many issues. I think as human beings, we oftentimes want to simplify, and we want to just act like there's a silver bullet that's going to solve all of this, right? So I'm in conversations all the time when people, hear about, oh, you're in homeless services or whatever. Oh, well, here's the problem, or here's what would help, this would solve it. No one thing is going to solve this. Like, this is not a silver bullet issue. There is rent stabilization, right? There's in affordable housing. We need to really spend some time, money, and resources on mental health. We need to help people when it comes to substance abuse issues. We need to give people more money in their pockets and their paychecks. We need to make sure that they're not having housing that costs 50%. In the city of St. Louis, 25%, so 1 out of 4 people spend over 50%, over half their paycheck to rent. That's unsustainable. That cannot happen. That is a major problem. And it's because they don't make enough, number one. And it's also because there's not enough affordable housing out there. Our housing stock is abysmal. So all these things play a role. I mean, it's segregation, it's all the issues that come up over time and still institutionally are a part of our systems. But rent stabilization, I would be a huge fan of that. I mean, that's one of the pieces. We just keep pushing all of them forward. And as Ramona talked about earlier, like, and Delaney, and we need more pressure to move us in this direction. And that's voices. That's where the power comes from.
I think it's also worth noting all of the barriers that are put up to housing, not just having income. You have to have you have to have good credit. You have to have never been evicted, no criminal record. Right. I had a woman that I was working with, and she was unhoused, and she finally got her tax refund, and she had like a few $1,000s, and we were like so excited because we were going to get her some housing. Well, she had evictions on her record. She had a hit on her police record for marijuana. Her credit's not good. So she's still living in her mother's basement with her 3 daughters right now. She had the cash and no landlord would take it. Mm-hmm. Seriously, the system is broken. This, the private real estate business here in the city isn't about helping poor people, and they're the ones who control the housing.
Yeah, thank you guys for your answers to those questions. Ramona, there also was a specific question for you from, I think, River. He's wondering when the next clothing donation is going to be.
Hi, River. Is that the River who's volunteered? There's not a whole lot of Rivers in this world. So yeah, we had a partnership with Route 66 Cannabis, and it just ended, where we got boatloads of clothing donations. Oh, actually, you can bring clothing donations to the Warming Center right now at 3050 Olive, or you can take them to St. Patrick's Center. You guys are collecting them, Anthony. What is that? 800 North Tucker. Delaney and Deborah, you guys got any locations for clothing?
Not really. Bring to Mokabee's warm gloves, and not warm gloves, I'm sorry, twin size blankets and hand warmers.
And I can tell you that the Warming Center, pretty much any unhoused population, has a huge need for new underwear.
Oh my goodness. Men's briefs. Don't bring them tighty whities. They don't like those. Bring them boxers.
T-shirts, underwear, long johns. We're also having a hard time finding warm gloves. So if anybody finds warm gloves.
Yeah, not the stretchy one size fits all, warm gloves.
I also want to highlight that it's most of the time volunteers or staff that's getting paid not enough who have to go through the clothing donations to make sure that they are okay to give out to folks. We really don't want to be handing out clothes with holes or that smell weird and things like that, because folks deserve like good quality clothing. So please, before you bring any donations, make sure that it's something that you would wear or that you would give to your siblings or your friends. Because it takes a lot of time to go through all of those clothes and make sure that they are okay to give to folks.
And don't bring me your Hawaiian print skirt this time of year.
Yes, please don't. Please don't bring those high heels that you wear to your 8th grade dance.
Right.
All right, well, thank you so much. So this is kind of the last call for audience questions. If anyone wants to like outrightly just like unmute themselves and speak, that's fine. If anyone wants to send anything last minute in the chat, that's fine. we can wait like a few seconds and just see if anyone has anything. All right, well, I think that will wrap up today's panel topics then. And just thank you so much again to our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much for all the wisdom that you're sharing with us, for all the action items, for sharing your passions with us. And we just really, really appreciate your time.